Hey, what's up you guys, it's Connor, and welcome back to part 5, I believe. In this part, we're going to go over some classics that I have that are just set aside, some of my big books that can't fit anywhere else on my shelves, as well as authors whose last names begin with the letter S through authors whose last names begin with the letter Z. If you've missed any of the other parts, they'll all be linked down in the description, so you can check those out if you want to, but let's get started. Okay, so this is going to be the last shelf of novels that I'm covering. And it's a little bit of a weird angle because it's right next to my bed, so I don't have a lot of space. But that's what it looks like. All the way down to the bottom. Nook's pet bed is right there. Up here I've got some classics, and then it starts over here on the left with the ending of authors whose last names begin with the letter R. So Roy, and then it goes like this, and then it jumps down here. Up here is all the big books that don't fit on any other shelves besides the top of the shelves. So then it just goes across all the way down, and on the bottom right down there is my yearbooks as well as some nonfiction. I'm just not even going to show that, so yep. Starting at the top, I'm not going to show you every single one of these books. I have some junior classics things. I have volumes 4, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I have yet to find the first 3 or 5 and 6, so when I find those, I'll add them to my collection. On the left, I have a Sorting Hat bookend, and then I have a couple of more classics. I have Black Beauty and Peter Pan in the Barnes & Noble Children's Leatherbound Classics editions, and then these really old Junior Deluxe editions, Pinocchio, Oliver Twist, Gulliver's Travel, Penrod and Sam, Daniel Boone, Wilderness Scout, and I have the matching bookend that matches the Sorting Hat bookend on this side. I've actually only read Peter Pan out of all of these, so I have some classics that I need to get to in the next year, but yeah, those are the ones that I've got there. Over here on the top of the last shelf in my room, I've got a very large bottle of champagne that I drank for graduating. My brother-in-law and my sister ended up giving it to me. I have a spine candlestick from Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, the Night Bus, and the Mr. Weasley's Ford Anglia, as well as this carving of a bird, which I don't know why I have it because I hate birds, but I got it while I was in the Caribbean. And then right there at the bottom of the candlestick is the cork for the champagne glass. I'll be going over these big books at the end of this part because I'm going to have to take them all down, and then I'll show them sitting on my bed instead of having them sit up here because I don't want them to fall. But I've got some really cool books like the deluxe Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone Illustrated Edition, as well as this one, which is the special collector's edition of The Tales of Beedle the Bard by J.K. Rowling. So most of these are Harry Potter, but I will show you them at the end. So on the real first shelf of this bookcase, I've got a hand grenade, which is an alcoholic drink that you can get on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. Then I've got Bloodguard and Glass Gauntlet, both by Carter Roy. These are the first 2 books in the Bloodguard series. I read and enjoyed the Bloodguard, but the Glass Gauntlet let me down a little bit, so I probably will not be continuing with the series, but I may if I find the 3rd book for cheap. Next is the Raven Shadow trilogy by Anthony Ryan, Bloodsong, Tower Lord, and Queen of Fire. I've read Bloodsong and Tower Lord and enjoyed them both. For different reasons, really. I enjoyed Bloodsong because of the coming of age aspects and learning about the world and everything like that, and then I thought that Tower Lord really expanded it and really went into more of the different peoples within his world. I thought there were some really cool female characters as well included. And then you can see I started Queen of Fire right here, but I never finished it because I got bored. So I may finish that one at some point, hopefully next year. I have Following Atticus by Tom Ryan, which I got in St. Martin because I had to use the restroom and they wouldn't let me use it unless I bought something. I've actually heard that this is pretty good, so I will be reading it at some point, but I haven't read it yet. Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Aliri Sands. Yeah, definitely recommend that one. Next on the shelf are all of my Angie Sage books. I don't really feel like pulling them all out, but on the top there I have the Septimus Heap The Magical Papers, which is the companion book, and then I have the Septimus Heap series, which is Magic, Flight, Physic, Quest, Dark, Siren, and Flight. So it goes like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the first 2 books in the next trilogy within the same world, which is the Todd Hunter Moon trilogy, Pathfinder and Sandrider. I really loved the Septimus Heap series. This is also on my shelf, this hippopotamus that I glazed. But I did read all of these books except for the Magical Papers, which I got recently. I liked Pathfinder, but I didn't like Sandrider as much. It didn't focus on the main character of the trilogy almost at all. She's barely in it, so I really didn't understand that. So I don't know if I'm going to continue with that secondary trilogy, but I do recommend the original Septimus Heap series. The Dark Elf trilogy by R.A. Salvatore, the collector's edition. This is the first trilogy chronologically in the Forgotten Realms series. I've read the first book of it, which I can't really remember what it was called, but I need to read the second and third books, and I will be continuing with this series. And last on the shelf is Attack of the Clones Star Wars Episode 2 by R.A. Salvatore. I read this, I think, a long time ago, but I haven't read it since, and I don't really remember too much about what actually happens or if there's any differences between this and the movie. So, yeah. Next is all my Brandon Sanderson books. It starts over here with the Reckoner's trilogy, and it goes all the way across this whole shelf and then onto the next shelf a little bit with the Alcatraz series. And on these shelves I have a Salazar Slytherin Chocolate Frog card, and I have a tie and some glasses and some sand that go along with the Alcatraz series. I have the Reckoner's trilogy by Brandon Sanderson, Steelheart, Firefight, and Calamity. I do actually have 2 copies of both Steelheart and Firefight, but I took them down just so I could fit the Arcanum Unbounded, so I'll have to figure out where I'm going to put those. But I did enjoy this trilogy. I thought it ended very sloppily. I didn't really like the third book and how it ended too much, but then he ended up saying that he's going to have a spin-off series, which is called The Apocalypse Guard. So I'll be reading that and hopefully getting more answers to this series, because Brandon Sanderson is known for having really fantastic, amazing endings to his series. I have 2 copies of The Rhythmatist by Brandon Sanderson because I read one and the other one is signed. Also, my copies of Steelheart and Firefight are also signed. These 4 books, the Reckoner's trilogy and the Rhythmatist, are not set in the Cosmere, so I put them towards the front because obviously they're not a part of the Cosmere. So I kept all the Cosmere books together. I have read this one and enjoyed it. It's not my favorite of his, but I thought the ideas were pretty interesting, and I'm pretty excited to see where he'll take it in the next book, which isn't supposed to come out until maybe next year or the year after, so quite some time to wait for that, but I will be anxiously awaiting. I have Elantris and The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson. These are both set in the same world in the Cosmere, so I figured I'd show them together. Elantris is the first book that he published, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't love it as much as the other Cosmere books because it's more politically driven instead of plot driven, but I still really enjoyed it and gave it 5 stars. The Emperor's Soul is one of my favorite novellas ever to exist, and I definitely recommend that one as well. Next up is the original Mistborn trilogy, which is The Final Empire, The Well of Ascension, and The Hero of Ages. I really love it, gave them all 5 stars, definitely recommend them. One of my favorite series, if not my favorite trilogy I've ever read. So yeah, definitely recommend that one too. Next is the continuation of the Mistborn series with The Alloy of Law, Shadows of Self, and The Bands of Mourning. These books are set 300 years after the original Mistborn trilogy, and so you shouldn't read them until after you've read the original trilogy, but I still really loved these as well. My copy of Shadows of Self is signed, and I do own 2 copies of Shadows of Self. I think I ended up giving Alloy of Law 4 stars and Shadows of Self and Bands of Mourning 5 stars. If not, I probably ended up giving Alloy of Law 5 stars as well, let's be real. I just put all the rest of his books that I've got on this part of the shelf up there. I've got Warbreaker, The Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, and Arcanum Unbounded, which is the Cosmere novella / short story collection. Warbreaker is my favorite standalone. I absolutely love it. Definitely recommend that one, 5 stars. Then The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance are the first 2 books in the Stormlight Archive series, which is his huge epic fantasy series that he's doing. Each book really contains 3 books in it. Like, look at how big each one is. It's humongous. But I'm really excited to read more books in the Cosmere, and I think I gave all of these 5 stars. As I said, these are my last Brandon Sanderson books. The Alcatraz series, I've got multiple copies of them because I have the original copies as well as the newer illustrated editions, and I have an arc of the last book because it's signed. And on the rest of the shelf, I have these books as well as another Buddha statue. The first book is Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians, The Scrivener's Bones, The Knights of Crystalia, The Shattered Lens, and The Dark Talent. And as I said, I have an arc of The Dark Talent as well. This is one of my favorite middle grade series of all time. I absolutely love it. So I definitely recommend this. If you have a chance to read it, definitely do. When you get to the last book though, make sure you read until the very last page because the ending is not the real ending. So Yeah, definitely keep going with that one. And I really love this series because it incorporates things that like yell at you if you try to skip pages, and they mess with the formatting and stuff like that. He'll purposely add some random word and then point out that he did that and you didn't notice it, kind of thing. So it's pretty funny and I love it. Then, as I said, I have the original covers, which are, again, Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians, The Scrivener's Bones, The Knights of Crystallia, and The Shattered Lens. The first two books I have here are signed, which is awesome, and these are the ones that I originally read the story out of, and then I need to go back and reread the series so that I can read the ones that have illustrations in them. I have the first book in the Mysteries of Cove series by J. Scott Savage, Fires of Invention. I read it, I liked it. I think that the future books in the series will be a little bit better than this first one. Yeah, that's all I've got for this one so far. Then I also have the Far World series by J. Scott Savage, which is Water Keep, Land Keep, Air Keep, and Fire Keep. I've read all of these and really enjoyed them. I really like that this series features a main character that is disabled. He has to use either a cane or a wheelchair to get around depending on which world he's in. This series takes place over Far World as well as Earth. And then the other main character lives in a world where there's magic, but she cannot do any magic. So it was fun to see kids that were the underdogs and they were still able to get the stuff done that they needed to get done. So really enjoyed this series a lot. Next is Fuzzy Nation by John Scalzi, Red Shirts by John Scalzi, and Lock In by John Scalzi. I've read Fuzzy Nation and Red Shirts and enjoyed them both. I gave Red Shirts 4 stars, but I gave Fuzzy Nation 5 stars. It is so funny. I absolutely love it. I have not read Lock In yet, so I can't really give an opinion on that one, but I'm hoping to get to it in 2017. Next is the Old Man's War series by John Scalzi. Old Man's War, The Ghost Brigades, The Last Colony, Zoe's Tale, The Human Division, and The End of All Things. Of these, I've read Old Man's War, The Ghost Brigades, The Last Colony, The Human Division, but I have not read Zoe's Tale or The End of All Things. Zoe's Tale is a retelling of The Last Colony in Zoe's perspective, and I haven't gotten to The End of All Things quite yet. But this is one of my favorite science fiction series ever. It is so funny. I absolutely love the social commentary and everything like that, so definitely suggest this series as well. On the next shelf, I have Golden Egg from the first challenge in the Triwizard Tournament from Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. It's awesome. I've showed it in other videos before, so I'm not going to really get it out and show you guys now, but on this shelf, I have all of this. I have a Hagrid Funko Pop, as well as a Dumbledore bust, and a Buddha statue, and a pair of earrings. Yes, my ears used to be pierced. I think my left one is still open, but my right one definitely closed up. I have the Archived and the Unbound by Victoria Schwab. These are the first two books in the Archived trilogy, duology. I think that she's actually going to end up coming out with the third one at some point, but we just don't know when. Then there's Vicious by V.E. Schwab, aka Victoria Schwab, as well as A Darker Shade of Magic. I have read Vicious and absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 stars. Definitely recommend that one. I haven't read A Darker Shade of Magic yet. I'm worried that I won't like it as much, but after I saw it at YALLFest, I think that I'm really going to enjoy it because I think that I really like the way that she goes about building worlds. I should be seeing how I like this one in 2017. Next is The Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel series by Michael Scott, which is The Alchemist, The Magician, The Sorceress, The Necromancer, The Warlock, and The Enchantress. I've read all 6 of these books and I really enjoyed all of them. It has mythology from a ton of different cultures, and so I really liked seeing how those cultures were represented, and seeing all of the gods and stuff interact was really fun and really cool to me. It follows 2 fraternal twins, Sophie and Josh, and they find out that they're twins of destiny and everything like that. So it's really, really enjoyable, and I definitely recommend this one if you like mythology. And the last book on the shelf is going to be Mirror Image by Michael Scott and Melanie Ruth Rose. I have not read this one yet, but it is a horror thriller book that has to do with an evil mirror that causes people to die. On the next shelf, I just have a Harry Potter bust, and then over there I have a Chocolate Frog box that I got my Chocolate Frog on the Salazar Slytherin Chocolate Frog card. And then that's pretty much it for this shelf. It's just a lot of Neil Shusterman and some other books. First up is The Invention of Hugo Cabret and Wonderstruck by Brian Selznick. I've read The Invention of Hugo Cabret and really, really enjoyed it, but I have not read Wonderstruck yet. These are the books that have a lot of pictures in them. They're pretty much 50% pictures and 50% words. I have The Bone Season and The Mime Order by Samantha Shannon. I read The Bone Season and wasn't overly impressed. I did enjoy it. I think I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, but I know Max from Well Done Books really enjoys this series, so I figured I would continue and read the mime order and see what I've been missing. My reading tastes have also changed a lot within the last year or so. So I think that I will probably appreciate these books a little bit more now that I'm older and a bit of a more mature reader. I say that, but I still love middle grade. But you know what I mean. So I'm hoping to give this series another go and see if I like it a little bit more now. Next is Everfair by Nisi Shawl. I got this in the fall tour box, so I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'm hoping to soon because I just really think the cover is gorgeous and I'm really curious to see how this alternative history is handled and everything like that. So I'll hopefully be doing a review on this when I finish it. Next is The Prince Warriors by Priscilla Scherer with Gina Detweiler, I'm not sure. I got this book at BEA and I did start reading it, as you can see here, but I got distracted by other books, so I'll be going back to this one and finishing it here soon. All the rest of the books on the shelf are all by Neil Shusterman, so I'm not going to say his name over and over again. I'm just going to read the titles of the books. I have also read all of these except for one. First up are his standalones that I've read: Downsiders, Chasing Forgiveness, and Full Tilt. Chasing Forgiveness is also called What Daddy Did when it was originally published, and then it was given a new name when it was republished. I have read all of these. I think my favorite was probably Chasing Forgiveness. It follows a true story, and I've actually read reviews on that where people actually know the family that that book is based off of. So yeah, awful, but also like very interesting to read about. If I forgot to mention this, Neil Shusterman's books all follow different moral lessons or moral topics. So Downsiders follows the dangers of ethnocentrism and forcing your culture on another person, and Full Tilt deals with facing your personal demons and not letting yourself get lost to them and not letting them control your life. I mean, all of his books are absolutely fantastic and definitely topic starters. If you want to talk to people about different topics, these books are fantastic. So these are some of his older books, and I tend to really love his more recent books a little bit more. Next is The Dark Side of Nowhere, which is actually also a standalone and also deals with ethnocentrism. This one is a science fiction book, and for some reason, I think because of the cover, I ended up thinking that this was going to be a mystery thriller book, and it's really not. But it definitely deals with relationships and interracial relationships. That's another topic that's covered in that book. Scorpion Shards and Thief Souls are the first two books in the Star Shards Chronicles. I have read Scorpion Shards and I have not read Thief of Souls. Next is the Skinjacker trilogy, which is Everlost, Everwild, and Everfound. This really follows two children and they end up in a car crash, but they're both not ready or willing to move on yet, so they end up in what's called Everlost, and they are ghosts practically, and it's just a place where children go, and so they're trying to navigate the waters of this new ghostly realm and figure out what they need to do and why they're there, and I really enjoyed it. I think this is the first series by Neil Shusterman that I have read. Two more standalones by Neil Shusterman are Bruiser and Challenger Deep. I absolutely love Challenger Deep. It's probably one of my favorite books that I read either this year or last year. I think I read it this year. So good. It deals with a boy that has schizophrenia, and Neil Shusterman actually included a lot of the drawings that his son did when he was suffering his first bout of schizophrenia. I absolutely love that one. It is really well done. Bruiser, the messages in that one are more of the dangers of always taking other people's pains away from them, and on the flip side of that, not taking advantage of other people to take away your responsibilities and such like that. So really enjoyed both of these. And the last books on the shelf are going to be the Unwind Dystology by Neil Shusterman, Unwind, Unholy, Unsold, and Undivided. I have a love-like relationship with this, where I really loved Unwind and Unholy, and then I was really disappointed by Unsold, and then Undivided seemed a little bit convenient. It has to do with forced organ donation and how these children between the ages of 13 and 17 are allowed to be what's called unwound, and their bodies are harvested for their parts and sold to the highest bidder. In the end, I really enjoyed this series, but I think that it started off a lot stronger than it finished. Take that as you will as well, but I still recommend this series. Okay, so now I've got it back on the tripod, so it should be pretty steady for the rest of the video. On the left, I have this bear statue that I've had since I was in kindergarten, I think. No, probably preschool, because I remember I had to read some poem out of a Shel Silverstein book. So have that. And then I also have my little stuffed animal teddy bear that I've had since I was a baby. Some post-it notes that I have never used. I always mean to tab my books and then I never remember. And then a book light for when I decide to read in the dark. I'm not sure why. The first book on the shelf is More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera. I have not read this one yet. I just picked it up at Y'all Fest because I met him and he was actually pretty cool and awesome, so I decided I wanted to read his book. The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. I want to collect all of Shel Silverstein's works because he was an influence on my childhood. The first two books in the Enda Quartet by Sherwood Smith, Enda and the Fox, I have read both of these. The Fox is actually the longest book that I read in 2016, and I enjoyed both of them. I feel like I always enjoy the first half of the book a little bit more than the second half, and I also enjoyed The Fox a bit more than I liked Enda, so I'm excited to see where all of these characters will end up in the rest of the series, because Sherwood Smith is really good about letting her stories unfold organically and not forcing the plot to go in any one direction, and main characters can be killed if that's how the story ends up unfolding, so I really enjoy her style of storytelling. Next is Eternal by Cynthia Smith. I don't know how to say her middle name / her maiden name, possibly. I think this is technically the second book in a series, but the first two books don't really overlap all that much, and I don't really remember what it's about. I know it has vampires, I think, in it, but I can't really tell you too much other than that. And all the rest of the books on the shelf are by Lemony Snicket, and it's a series of unfortunate events. The Unauthorized Biography, The Bad Beginning, The Reptile Room, The Wide Window, The Miserable Mill, The Austere Academy, The Ersatz Elevator, The Vile Village, The Hostile Hospital, The Carnivorous Carnival, Slippery Slope, and The Grim Grotto. I never finished this series, and it was one of the first series that I ended up starting, so I don't know how that even happened, because I used to marathon series all the time. So I really need to go back and reread some of these and continue with the series and finish it so I know how it ends, because I still don't know. On the next shelf, I have another childhood stuffed animal. It's this lamb, as well as this magnifying glass that I got for Christmas last year, and some random bottles back in here. And then on the other side of the shelf, I've got my Snape Funko Pop, as well as a Dragon Clay figure that I painted, and also my beer mug from my undergraduate fraternity years, filled with a bunch of sunglasses. Perfection and Flawed by J.L. Spellbring. I read Perfection and enjoyed it, but I never continued on to read Flawed, and I probably won't continue because it's been so long and I think I've lost interest in this series. The Emperor's Blades and The Providence of Fire by Brian Staveley. I've read both of these and really enjoyed them. The Emperor's Blades has more of a get to know the world vibe, and The Providence of Fire is really when it gets politically interesting, and there's all these different masses forming, and there's armies forming, and you don't really know who's going to come out on top and everything like that. I really like where the direction of this story is going. I have Demons of the Ocean, which is the first book in the Vampirate series by Justin Somper. These are vampire pirates, which I thought was really funny, and so I wanted to learn more about them. I think I ended up giving it 3.5 stars or something like that. Next are the Books of Beginning trilogy by John Stevens, The Emerald Atlas, The Fire Chronicle, and The Black Reckoning. I've read all three of these books, and although I think that this trilogy became slightly formulaic, I did enjoy this series, and I also don't know why they changed the cover of the third book and didn't give it this border, even though the spines all match. That was a bad decision on their part. And the last book on this shelf is going to be Anathem by Neil Stephenson. This is the first book by Neil Stephenson that I have. I have not read it yet because it is absolutely enormous, but I'm really excited to give it a go and see if I like his writing or not, because there are a lot of humongous books by him that I could read in the future if I do. This shelf has no decorations on it at all, so let's just get started with the books. The Hollow Hills by Mary Stewart. I'm not sure why I only have the second book in the Arthurian saga, but I think it was school reading at some point, and I was never forced to read the first book. Next is the Edge Chronicles, so I'm just warning you, it's going to be a little bit confusing with numbers and everything like that, because I put my books in chronological order, so let's just get started. In chronological order, the first trilogy of this overall series is the Quint trilogy, which is The Curse of the Gloamglozer, The Winter Nights, and Clash of the Sky Galleons, but publishing order, it's books 4, 8, and 9. I have not read Clash of the Sky Galleons yet. I read them in publishing order, and I regret that, and I wish I had read them chronologically, so that's why on my shelf I put them chronologically, so when I go back to reread them, I'll read them in the order that I prefer reading these books in. The second trilogy of the overall series is called the Twig trilogy, and these books are actually the books that were published first, which are Beyond the Deep Woods, Storm Chaser, and Midnight over Sanctifrax. I have read all of these and enjoyed them. And the last 3 books of the series that I currently have are called the Rook Trilogy, and those were published 5, 6, and 7. They are The Last of the Sky Pirates, Vox, and Freeglader. The series does continue on after this. I'm not really sure how that is. I know there's one book that wraps up these 3 trilogies all together, and that's the 10th book, and then it goes on from there. I haven't read past book 8, so I need to read book 9 and then continue. I also have the first 2 books in the Barnaby Grimes series, which are also by Paul Stewart and Chris Riddell, Curse of the Nightwolf and Return of the Emerald Skull. I have decided not to continue with this series because it doesn't have one continuous plot. Like, you don't have to read them in any particular order. Return of the Emerald Skull could be read before Curse of the Nightwolf and you wouldn't be spoiled for pretty much anything. I wish that there would be some more development within the characters. They kind of just reset and then have another story. For some reason, I still own the Shiver trilogy. What is this called? The Wolves of Mercy Falls trilogy by Maggie Stiefvater. I read the first one and the second one, actually, and I gave up. I don't know why I still own them. I have The Raven Boys and The Raven King, both by Maggie Stiefvater. These are books 1 and 4 in the Raven cycle. I've read the first book, but I haven't continued with the series yet. I picked up The Raven King when I was at YALLFest because it is signed. So I should be reading The Dream Thieves here in the early part of next year because I want to buddy read the 3rd book with some of my friends. Next is the Rhyuria Revelation series by Michael J. Sullivan. There are 6 books in the series, but they come in bind-ups of 2 each. So the first bind-up is Theft of Swords, the second is Rise of Empire, the third is Heir of Novron. I really enjoy this series a lot, and I've talked about it so much on my channel, so we're just gonna move on. Then I also have the prequel series to the Rhyuria Revelations, which is called the Rhyuria Chronicles, The Crown Tower, The Rose and the Thorn, and The Death of Dolgath. The Death of Dolgath is self-published, and I think for the rest of these books, they're all going to be self-published. He did announce fairly recently, I don't know how long ago it was, that he will be doing a 4th book in this series, and each book is written so that he could just end the series wherever. Like, if the readers stop really wanting more books, then he'll stop making more. But as long as the readers still want more stories with Royce and Hadrian, he'll continue to make them. I do believe that you should read the Rhyuria Revelations first before reading the Rhyuria Chronicles, because you'll just love some of the characters a bit more. But yeah, Michael J. Sullivan. And this book is technically on the next shelf, but it's Michael J. Sullivan, so I figured I'd put it in before I talk about the next shelf. That is Age of Myth. This book is set 3,000 years, I believe, or something like that, thousands of years before the Rhyuria Revelations or the Rhyuria Chronicles. So all of these books are all set in the same world, just different time periods, and I do think that you should read the Rhyuria Revelations first before reading this book. Onto the next shelf, I just have a remote control Wally, and then I don't have any other decorations on this shelf. I have The Tree Shepherd's Daughter by Gillian Summers. I read this book quite a while ago, so I probably won't be continuing with this saga trilogy thing. Next are my books in the Wings of Fire series by Tui T. Sutherland. I don't own the first 2 books because I borrowed them from my brother when I originally read them, but the 3rd book is The Hidden Kingdom, the 4th book is The Dark Secret, The Brightest Night, Moon Rising, and the last book that I have in the series is Winter Turning. These books follow dragonettes that are a part of this prophecy that says that they will be choosing the winner of this huge war that's happening. I really enjoy them. They're a bit violent, but I think that middle grade readers would absolutely love them, and it's the series that got my brother into reading originally. So I have the first 2 books in the Menagerie series by Tui T. Sutherland and Carrie Sutherland, which is her sister, The Menagerie and Dragon on Trial. I have not read Dragon on Trial yet, but I did read The Menagerie, and it was cute. I don't love it as much as the Wings of Fire series, but it's definitely interesting, and I really like seeing all of these different mythological creatures and everything like that. Next are my Saba Tahir books, An Ember in the Ashes, A Torch Against the Night, and An Arc for A Torch Against the Night. All of these are signed, so that's why I kept the arc, because I keep signed arcs that are signed to me. I've read both of these. I've done a review on both of them, I believe. Next is the first book in the Empire in Black and Gold series by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which is Shadows of the Apt. I have not read this book yet, but I plan to soon. It's one of those epic fantasy books that I have been putting off because I wanted to finish some other epic fantasy series that I've got going on, but I need to just take the plunge and read this one. Then are the first 2 books in the Secrets of the Seven series by Sarah L. Thompson, the Eureka Key and the Eagle's Quill. I have not read the Eagle's Quill yet, but I did read the Eureka Key and did a review on it, and I really enjoyed that one. So I'm looking forward to getting to Eagle's Quill and learning a bit more about the series and the characters and about American history. And the last two books on this shelf are going to be The End of Mr. Y by Scarlett Thomas and Walden by Henry David Thoreau. I have not read either of these. I did start The End of Mr. Y, and I made it about, I don't know, 50 pages or so, but I never continued with it, and I do plan to finish this one at some point, but I tried to read Walden as well, and I really didn't like it. On this shelf on the left, I have a map of the Lonely Mountain, a drawing of a dragon that my brother did when he was very young, Sobering, which is the beer that the dwarves would drink when they were filming, and anytime they had like the alcohol in the Hobbit movies, it was this. It has a very, very, very low alcohol content. And then on the right, I have a key to the Lonely Mountain. The first book on the shelf is going to be The Adventures of Tom Bombadil by J.R.R. Tolkien. Tom Bombadil is one of my favorite characters from the Lord of the Rings series. He's in the first part of it, The Fellowship of the Ring, and he is just so funny. He's a nature spirit, so I really wanted to read more about him, but I haven't read this one yet, so I haven't actually done it, but I did buy the book. I have my copy of The Children of Hurin, which I have not read yet because I want to read The Silmarillion before I read this one, because I guess that's the suggested reading order. So next is my copy of The Hobbit, which I have read. I've read it a couple of times, so I really do enjoy it. I also have this very nice edition of the complete Lord of the Rings, all 3 books in one, and I've read all 3. I didn't read out of this edition just because it's quite large, but I did really enjoy them. And the last book on this shelf is going to be Tolkien, an Illustrated Atlas, which I received for Christmas last year by David Day. And on the second to last shelf of this entire novel section of the bookshelf tour, I have a bottle of Jägermeister, which I drank while in college, and then on the right of the shelf are just some jars as well. I'm going to try to speed this up. So I've got the Bible According to Mark Twain, which is edited by Howard G. Beitzold and Joseph B. McCullough, and The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making by Catherine M. Valente. I really enjoyed both of these. I read the Bible According to Mark Twain for high school and really enjoyed it, and The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making had a slow start, but I ended up really loving it towards the end. Hunters of Chaos by Crystal Velasquez. I read this one recently. It's about 4 girls from different nationalities that can turn into different types of big cats, and it has a lot of messages of accepting other people's cultures and everything like that. It's kind of a funny story by Nev Vizzini. I read this one back in high school and really, really enjoyed it. I recommend It's Kind of a Funny Story a lot. The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender by Leslie Walton. I loved this book, gave it 5 stars. The Martian by Andy Weir. I haven't read this one yet, and I haven't seen the movie either. I know basically what happens because I've been spoiled, but I still want to read the book and see how I feel about it. Shadow Raiders by Margaret Weiss and Robert Krames? I'm not sure. Haven't read that one yet. Dragons of Autumn Twilight by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. I have read and enjoyed. I want to continue the series, but I haven't found the second book yet. Wheel of the Infinite by Martha Wells. I read this a long time ago, and at the time, I feel like I judged it a little bit harsher than I should have, meaning I think I was just in a bad mood when I was reading it, so I ended up giving it a lower rating, but I think that if I reread it, I would give it a higher rating. The Books of Raxura by Martha Wells, The Cloud Atlas, The Serpent Sea, and The Siren Depths. I really enjoyed all 3 of these books. I liked The Siren Depths and The Cloud Roads a little bit more than The Serpent Sea, but I recommend this series if you're looking for some accessible high fantasy. I don't feel like it's super dry like a lot of epic fantasy is, but it's got a very rich world filled with tons of different people and tons of different cultures. Also, all the characters in these books are bisexual, so if you're looking for books with bisexual characters, these are some good ones. I also have both volumes of the Stories of the Raxura, which are companion novellas and short stories that happen throughout the Books of Raxura trilogy. Under the Empyrean Sky is the first book in the Heartland trilogy, which I have read the whole trilogy and really, really enjoyed that trilogy. It is so unpredictable, and I think that's one of the main things that I love about it so much, is that I never knew exactly where the story was going to go, and it could have gone many, many different directions at any point. I have not read Blackbirds yet, but I hope to do that soon because I think that I really am going to love Chuck Wendig as an author, and he might become one of my favorites. And we're down to the last shelf that is going to be in this part of the bookshelf tour. Sorry about the dust. This is the bottom shelf and I don't clean it all that often. It also doesn't have any decorations on it because Nook would pull them off and chew them up. So that's just what this shelf looks like. Leviathan by Scott Westerfeld. I read this year and I did enjoy it. I will be continuing with the series when I pick up the next books. Next are the 3 books in the Midnighters trilogy by Scott Westerfeld: The Secret Hour, Touching Darkness, and Blue Moon. All of these are signed because I've gotten them signed over the years, and this is my favorite trilogy by Scott Westerfeld. Next is the Uglies series by Scott Westerfeld: Uglies, Pretties, Specials, and Extras. I read the original trilogy and I have not read Extras yet. It was a goal of mine this year to read Extras and I didn't do it, so I'm sad about that, but maybe next year I will finish it. Next is Alien Morning by Rick Wilbur. I have not read this one yet. I can't even tell you what it's about because I got it in the tour box for fall. So when I read it, I'll let you know. Updraft and Cloudbound by Fran Wilde. These are the first 2 books in this series. I don't even know what it's called. I think it's just called the Updraft series. This one follows people that are in spires made of bone, and they have fake wings that they can fly from spire to spire on. It's very YA dystopian, so if you're not into that, I don't suggest it, but I did enjoy the first book enough to continue with the series, and I did a book review on Updraft and gave it 4 stars, so I should be reading Cloudbound at some point soonish in the future. Belzar by Meg Wolitzer. I got this one recently, so I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it has to do with this girl's boyfriend dies, and then she gets sent to a boarding school, and then she has to do this journal assignment, but then she starts breaking with reality. I'll let you guys know what I think when I read it. 13th Child and Across the Barrier by Patricia C. Reed, I'm not sure. I didn't love Across the Barrier or The 13th Child, so I won't be continuing with this series. The Fifth Wave and The Infinite Sea by Rick Yancey. I was super disappointed by The Infinite Sea, pretty much like everyone else in the world, so I don't really have a desire to finish the trilogy, but I did enjoy the first book when I read it. And the last 2 books in this part of the bookshelf tour are going to be Poison by Bridget Zinn, which I have read and enjoyed. I gave it 4 stars. And The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak, which is my favorite historical fiction book I've ever read. Fantastic. Recommend that one. I've read it multiple times since, and every time I love it. So recommend that one. So those are all the books that I have on my shelves. The next part and the final part is going to cover my manga as well as some of my arcs and my comic books / graphic novels that you haven't already seen. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and comment down below on any of the books that you've seen in this part. Obviously, Brandon Sanderson is my favorite author. Who is your favorite author? Let me know down below, and I will talk to you guys next time.